Welcome to the latest installment of the Ideas and Innovation podcast. Just a quick word about our sponsorship. We are sponsored by the Luminosity Institute of Cambridge. It's a social enterprise that's focused mostly on bridging academia and the public sphere. So in the Ideas and Innovation podcast, we invite leading academics from a wide range of disciplinary perspectives to think about the impact of technological innovation on society. On this subject matter, we have managed to invite, it's our absolute pleasure and honor to invite Professor Luciano Floridi, the Professor of Philosophy and Ethics, Information, and Director of the Digital Ethics Lab of the Oxford Internet Institute at the University of Oxford, and Professorial Fellow of Exeter College, Oxford, to our podcast. Professor Floridi has published widely on logic, epistemology, and the theoretical foundations of the concept of information. He is a pioneer in the field of the philosophy of information. His books include The Philosophy of Information, The Ethics of Information, The Fourth Revolution, and most recently, The Logic of Information, a theory of philosophy as conceptual design. So welcome, Professor Floridi.
Thank you for having me over. Thank you very much.
So before we sort of dive into the details of your work to discuss sort of the fascinating battery of concepts that you develop in your book, The Fourth Revolution, I want to begin by sort of asking a meta question, because I am sort of also an aspiring philosopher. You are a philosopher. As a philosopher who works not only on theoretical issues, sort of ivory tower issues, as you sometimes call them, but also on highly practical issues of digital ethics and politics, what is philosophy for you? And in particular, what do you think philosophy is able to bring to the table? What distinctive things can it bring to the table when it comes to dealing with problems like AI, big data, or climate change?
Well, thank you. That is a classic meta-philosophical question. We've been asking it forever in our profession. And every stage of philosophy, every philosopher has his own answer. It's part of being a philosopher, having an answer to that particular question. In my case, I see philosophy as conceptual design. In other words, as a way of looking at specific problems, I'll tell you more in a moment, so that we understand the nature of those problems, and then we can design answers to those questions or solutions to those problems in such a way that we do two things at once. There's better understanding of the issues we're dealing with, but also an extra opportunity to send things in the right direction, to make a difference in the world, such that the world will be a better place afterwards. I'll tell you, just one more point about what kind of questions. Otherwise, this could apply to anything. I mean, it could be a description of mathematics, it could be a description of engineering and so on. Well, the kind of questions that we deal with are, I like to call them open questions, because they are the kind of questions that remain open after you are fully informed, even if totally rational, reasonable in exchanging ideas, and yet you and I, both informed, reasonable, and rational, could still be disagree on the answers, and neither of us is not informed, irrational, unreasonable. They are open by default, and therefore, such as, should we have a party on Friday? I mean, you can pile up all the information you want, all the maths and the empirical evidence you can possibly imagine. That question is still such that we might disagree on the answer. No matter how much we, as it were, accumulate on the empirical and logical mathematical side, meaning that that space, that open space, open to disagreement, reasonable, rational, informed, is where philosophy comes in. So we, as philosophers, are the ultimate experts on open questions. That's where design makes a difference. Otherwise, people don't quite get it. So I'm not talking about conceptual engineering, kind of style and so on. Nope. I'm not talking about logical or conceptual analysis. There's only one step towards design. I'm talking about putting together the constraints, the affordances about these open questions in view of a particular goal, and then provide the answers. So that is the basic idea of what I look like, what I see is philosophy for me, conceptual design.
I want to come back to this point because I think maybe there's there's quite a bit to talk about in terms of the title of your previous book, The Fourth Revolution, sort of this idea of the revolutionary moment where, and I wonder whether that's sort of connected to your understanding of open questions and the role of philosophy in sort of designing concepts to deal with these sort of revolutionary moments. But before we get to that, I'm also just curious about your research group, the Digital Ethics Lab. Sort of concretely, I just wonder what kinds of work do you guys do there?
Sure. I mean, the kind of work that we do, I like to define it using an adjective which is very common in medical science: translational. In medical science, if you do translational work, you are in between the purely abstract, foundational, but not really concerned with applications kind of work on the one hand, and the totally applied, everyday, make a difference first sort of work on the other. So the translational is what tries to do, in my view, not translational philosophy. Philosophy has always been translational, the good one, meaning that you dig as deeply as possible in terms of foundations in view of what that foundations will make a difference to in the future. In other words, you look at the roots because you care about the flowers. Unless you look at the roots, there is no caring for the flowers. But if you look only at the flowers, well, they will not last long unless you know what to do with the roots of the problems. And that's the translational work that we do in the area that normally is called with an acronym ELSI, E-L-S-I, meaning ethical, legal, social implications of digital technologies. So anything from say, regulation of the new ethical way of using weapons in cyber war, all the way to the use of algorithms in business, everyday life, or disinformation, misinformation online, the regulation of platforms. But everything is done from a more philosophical perspective. So looking at the deep roots of the problems, the faraway consequences, impact of the solutions that we may or may not adopt today. So to me, it's not applied philosophy. I don't quite like the expression applied philosophy. It's more applicable philosophy, which is a bit different. To me, applicable philosophy is what we've been doing since Socrates. Now, it makes a difference to the extent that people forget, but our founding father basically died for his applicable philosophy. And yet, it wasn't really not applied philosophy in the ordinary sense of pick up something from the shelf and see how it works in real life. So that's the kind of work we do: translational, applicable, looking at the foundations to make a difference to the rest of the building.
That's a good segue into sort of our previous discussion. So I do want to first ask you the general question. What is this idea of the fourth revolution that you have? And in relation to that, I wonder whether that connects to your previous discussion about the your metaphilosophical point about the distinctive role of philosophy in the face of what you called open questions.
Sure. Let me answer that question with a bit of a running up, as you were, and also a step back to move forward to the fourth revolution. There are many ways of looking at the history of philosophy, and my own personal way is a bit like a sort of a wave and roller coaster, so to speak, ups and downs, where the ups are when we do good philosophy, when we, as humanity, we care about philosophical problems. The downs are when we start getting so much in love with what we do that we start caring about philosophers' problems. The distinction is crucial. No one cares anything about philosophers' problems. Whether that barn really is or isn't, something that looks like a place. Whether that machine will or will not make me happy if I join that machine. Whether some particular entities called zombies that have quality or not quality, no one, and trust me, no one gives a damn. Not about the answers, about the questions, okay? So we could be doing all that, which is very enjoyable, by all means, and Sudoku kind of entertainment. And if we were to stop no one will ever miss it. Now, that is not what philosophical problems are about. And let me give you a couple of examples. Today, democracy is not quite working. What do we do to reform it? We need a new Plato, basically, or a new Aristotle, or a new someone, a new Rousseau, a new, great philosopher, possibly female, finally, to show us the way, because it's not doing very well. Or, the new world of social epistemology, understood, I know I'm talking to an expert, understood in terms of crowdsourcing, for example. And do we have a new science on the block? No, data science. What is it? What are the epistemological foundation of data science? Is there a science like data science? Or is that just a way of putting together a bit of this, a bit of that? Are we looking at basically cybernetics, which never took off, or biochemistry, which of course is a real science today? Now, a couple of examples, just straight from newspapers, which of course need philosophical reflection, because we want to know, we want to understand. So, to your point, what kind of questions are we dealing today, in my view, that need all philosophical attention? Well, a lot of the questions that we're dealing with today, and I brought you to light some of the examples, are prompted by, either directly or indirectly, by the digital revolution. So in the same way as you have these ups and downs, and the downs are when we start doing ivory tower research, we play Sudoku with our own concepts. It's basically scholasticism in the non-historical sense. But philosophy, talking to philosophy, about philosophy, to itself, for itself. How do we get out of those valley, as it were, to go back to the peak of the mountain or the hill in the history of philosophy, ups and downs, where something or someone drags philosophy out of the room? Normally, it's something really robust. Someone sort of signaling, hello, we need your help here. Experts on open problems, as we said before. Stop talking about yourself, to yourself, within yourself. Here, come and give us a hand. Those are, quote unquote, some kind of revolutions. We use the word with a bit of freedom now, but something transformative. And it's not accidental that all of a sudden Athens, 5th century, boom, something happens. Or imagine medieval philosophy without Christianity, which was the real engine of transformation of philosophical thinking all of a sudden. Scientific revolution. Now, where would Descartes be if we hadn't been for the mathematical revolution and so on? And then you start looking at history as something that is, as you were, the dragging force that takes the philosophy away from its own ivory tower, very enjoyable, of course, intellectual game, and says, can you please give me a hand? Because we have pressing issues, which we need to understand and design better, open problems. Problems today, to me, the dragging force today clearly is the digital revolution. Hence, finally, sorry for the long premise, the idea of this full revolution in our self-understanding. It's just one of the many reasons why we need philosophy participating in the debate as philosophy, not mocking science, not mocking policy, but contributing, as we always done since Socrates onwards, at least on this corner of the world, to a better understanding of our world and a better design of the future. The fourth revolutions are straightforward. I mean, it's the displacement of our centrality from the center of the universe. It was Copernicus. We were comfortably at the center of the universe and then push out. Remember, a techno-scientific revolution there. Then we retrenched into the centrality of the animal kingdom, but Darwin came and we were pushed out of that. We're not at the center of the animal kingdom either. Freud, who had the idea of putting the first two in line and says, look, I'm bringing you a third revolution after Copernicus and Darwin. Here we go. We're not at the center of the mental space. Forget about Descartes, forget about Pascal, the cogito and so on. All that transparency is not there. God knows what is, as it were, in the bottom or underground of that building. People may contest and object, Freud and psychoanalysis, Popper-like is not a real science. It doesn't matter. Look at neuroscience today. That is, in any case, a revolution in terms of how much we know about what is going on in terms of self-awareness in our minds. Very little. I mean, tip of the iceberg, the rest of the iceberg is submerged. So all I did in the book was to line up a fourth revolution and say, well, there was a space where we had retrenched once again, the space of information. We thought we were the only one able to play chess, buy that cheap ticket online, exchange those bonds quickly across the net, or land the airplane, etc. And of course, we know that that is no longer true. Now, this fourth revolution, Turing, etc., is one last step in terms of decentralization of humanity. And I close here with two quick comments, if I may. One is, when I hear sort of anthropocentric or human-centric design of AI, clearly people haven't quite got the point, have they? I mean, we should stop putting humanity at the center. We need to put this planet at the center of our concerns. We have destroyed this planet by putting ourselves at the center. Time to stop. We are here to serve and care for the planet, not the other way around. Otherwise, we don't get out of this story alive. Okay, this is not a joke. We get a generation or two to save a planet. Putting ourselves at the center, I know what it means, I know the good intention and so on, but it's still the wrong philosophy. It's because I'm worth it. Me. Humanity being a child thinking that the whole party is about him or herself. No, we're grown-ups, we organize the party for the rest of humanity and the planet. And the other point is about the confusion normally, and I've been told, oh no, then you have true belief in artificial intelligence. Of course not. Artificial intelligence is just another technology, and it's as intelligent as my grandmother's fridge. I know I am one of the few who says so, especially among philosophers. It's very fashionable to expect the next AI revolution. We will expect forever, not for a while, forever, because we took a different route. The AI we're developing has got nothing to do with human intelligence. It's like assuming that if you go one way, then sooner or later you will reach the point that you left behind. No, you would just get more and more distant. We have detached agency from intelligence. That is the revolution. We will increasingly have agency that is devoid of any intelligence and yet increasingly successful. How? Well, maybe more on this podcast, but that's the route we've taken. So if anything, we are sort of distancing ourselves more and more from anything that looks like human intelligence, but not in terms of getting more or different kind of intelligence. So the fourth revolution is not about AI, but it's about our self-understanding. That is the whole quick story in terms of your very difficult question. Thank you.
A point I would like to follow up is on this process of decentering that you talk about, how we slowly through these four revolutions have found ourselves to be more and more, come to realize that we never were at the center of the universe. But I wonder how exactly you understand this process. It's simply almost inevitable given the theories put forth by Copernicus and Darwin and Freud and now Turing. Given the social conditions that have emerged since then, that we will simply come to accept the fact that we are not at the center? Or is there more of an active role of changing the way we think about ourselves, that some more active process needed here? And here, perhaps, there's a more urgent role for the philosopher or any sort of intellectual to sort of help the public understand what is already the case, or to make this change of the self-conception happen.
Yeah, I think that the self-conception is something that, if you like, percolates through culture. You don't go around by providing that sort of quote-unquote education to the public, or let's not educate it by that's sort of arrogant and paternalistic and so on. What happens through centuries is that our culture changes its fundamental sensitivities, the things that we take for granted. I like to call that the Urphilosophie, now to use a German word, as you know, the philosophy behind the philosophy. And so any philosopher, for example, myself included, ours, whoever is listening, works within a particular Urphilosophie anyway. So we are already assuming uncritically, unsuspiciously, without realizing the very, very foundations of our thinking. So that is kind of inevitable. And part of the philosophical task is to become aware of that, dig more deeply, start thinking, why am I thinking what I'm thinking? Why do I find this important today? Why this conception rather than another? Why in the 21st century, this issue seems to be more pressing than other issues, and so on. So that is part of the constant further understanding that philosophy provides to philosophy and to humanity. There's nothing inevitable in all this, meaning that it might have taken much, much longer, for example, for a Darwin to appear, or for a Freud to make his point, or say for a Turing to change our conception. So inevitability maybe is a bit strong, but there is something in terms of matter of fact that sooner or later you bump against, and that is that we are not at the center of the universe at the end of the day. I mean, certainly not in terms of, we, the Earth and the Sun goes around and so on, and all the rest of the universe is just created so that this special planet would be, as it were, leading the whole story. And if most of us by now, and if you exclude some weird people, don't believe in the flat Earth, don't believe that Darwin was just a scientific hypothesis, etc. And again, if you drop Freud and you just go for neuroscience, something I'm very well sort of acquainted, since my wife is the chair of neuroscience here in Oxford. Well, it's amazing how much there is more than we can possibly be conscious and aware of in our mental processes. So there is something there in terms of decentralization. All this, it's a matter of bumping and taking care of facts. Now, we interpret those facts. I mean, all this could have been just passed on, and we could have simply, with a lot of effort, re-engineer everything around ourselves anyway. But you know what? The easiest way, the honest way, is to acknowledge the facts and say, okay, this is not longer the kind of culture or philosophy that we can assume uncritically. We're not at the center of these four spaces. The question becomes, but as humanity, we like to put ourselves at the center. We were the ultimate, egocentric as humanity and as individuals, engine. So what is the new centrality that we are trying to build? Well, look at what I just said before. Now we need to have the human-centric design of this and that. So at least things have to be, we're not at the center, but have to be designed so that we are going back to the center. I think that's a bad idea, as I said. We should resist that. If anything, the 21st century should be, if you allow me a bit of terminology here, either heterocentric or allocentric, but mostly ontocentric, kind of a philosophy that puts reality at the center, not just us. Now, the next step is to put neither of the two, but actually relations at the center, but maybe for another day, if we don't have time today, is the relationship between A and B that really makes A and B who they are, what they are. And that's what both A and B should be careful about. So that in most of my philosophy, you will find between the lines a lot of relationalism kind of philosophy, which is not relativism. It's just the importance of the interaction between A and B. In other words, a way of looking at the reality as a network, not like as a mechanism. And I close here. The mechanism is something where pieces, self-standing, already working, come together to do something together. A wheel and maybe chassis and an engine make a car, but you can have a wheel in and of itself. 4 wheels standing. A network is something where the nodes don't exist before the relations between the nodes. There's nothing like a roundabout without the roads connecting. You don't have a roundabout without the roads. You don't have a knot without the links. So that's why thinking in terms of relational, at the center, the relations, back to what you were saying, is not inevitable, but I think it's a good way of doing philosophy.
So is the claim that through these background, as sort of we reconceptualize ourselves and come to these new understandings in science and in philosophy and in psychology, in conjunction with large-scale socio-cultural changes, these reconceptualizations simply sort of naturally will occur. But the worry I have there is the one you mentioned just now, is the disconnect between the way we actually live our lives and the way we understand ourselves. So though we might grant that it is true, the majority of educated people sort of now recognize that we are no longer at the center of the universe or the animal kingdom, or even are exclusively capable of processing and manipulating information. Yet we continue to live at a practical level as though we did not know this. We continue to live as though none of these four revolutions happened. I mean, in particular, I think about the depth of the entrenchment of, say, the conception of our own minds as transparent to ourselves. That seems to be something especially hard for people to give up. I imagine this at the practical level, the reconceptualization of ourselves as not at the center of the universe is also similarly difficult to give up, insofar as everyday experience is almost seemingly necessarily egocentric.
Well, that's true. In fact, generalizing, there are at least sort of three forces, broadly speaking, that push us in the wrong direction all the time. I mean, there's religion, technology, and our culture. I'm generalizing because it's not true of every aspect of religion and every religion, but there's a tendency in religious thinking of putting humanity at the center. It's hardly ever the case that the thinking is done in terms of putting humanity in the periphery of the discourse. And technology today, if anything, digital technologies do undermine, as we said before, Turing, etc. But on the appearance, I mean, social media, for example, they do exactly the opposite. I mean, what they tried immensely to do is that you, Luciano, are absolutely precious. You're so important. I always refer to the old L'Oreal advertisement, because you are worth it. And it's all about you, making people feel important, taking seriously, taken care of, pampered, etc. Where do you find the technology says that, you know what, no, you're just one of a grain of sand on a beach. I couldn't care less about you. As long as I have all the other grains of sand, I need a beach, but no, you're dispensable. No one will ever say that. No, of course, they need every single grain of sand, feeling that I am the beach. And then, of course, our general culture, the consumerism, especially in Western societies, is geared around making sure that the consumer or the user, or if you like, the citizen, different for another day, different distinctions, feels important. And so this empowering, for example, rhetoric, not the enabling rhetoric, the empowering rhetoric, and so on, they all push us towards a forgetfulness in terms of we're not that important, none of us is, we're not at the center of anything, we're on a small planet in the middle of nowhere. Nature had this beautiful glitch, as I like to call it, but we are a glitch, no matter how beautiful, and we might not have appeared on this planet easily. There are other species that did not appear that would be much easier than us to produce, like unicorns. Unicorns are really simple for nature to produce. I mean, it's just a horse with a horn. There are much stranger animals. So all that is a constant reminder, if you like, existential reminder of the fact, okay, well, does this have any meaning at the end? Because if I'm at the center of the story, at least the story is organized in such a way that I am, as it were, the primary actor, the main character. The story is about me, so I don't have to build my own meaning because the story is about me already. But if, as it is, the story is not about either me as an individual or me as humanity, how do we build our own semantics so that it becomes something that really provides some meaning, despite being a beautiful glitch at the periphery of being capital B and so on? Well, those are the real philosophical questions. Anything else is being taken for a ride by our own culture. But that's why philosophy is so important. Now, that is where you start scratching the very sort of the thin veneer of self-congratulatory, anthropocentric aspect of our own culture, and immediately there is the Nietzschean abyss of lack of centrality, meaning, importance, and therefore, finally, we can start building. Because I'm, at the end of the day, quite optimistic, mildly, about the fact that humanity can build its own immanent semantics, that a semantics that is entirely historical is possible. But we need to start building it with our own sort of abilities, not sort of deluding ourselves in some sort of storytelling, religion, technology, culture, whatever you like, so that at the end of the day, I am the most important entity in this universe. Only the day we realize that we are not, we can start finally building from that ground, painfully, up. Until then, we're just floating on self-delusion.
So that actually touches on one of the questions I initially had when I read your book. You talk about the role of philosophy as one of semanticizing our situation. And initially, I had understood that just helping us figure out what is happening, given all these revolutionary changes around us, technologically, conceptually. But given what you just said, it seems like what you mean by semanticize at least has one other meaning, which is that we're really making sense of our situation, where we're giving meaning to.
Exactly.
And so could you speak a little bit more about perhaps the relationship between these two ways of understanding what you mean by semanticize?
I've been accused of having a bit of a habit of coining new words, but I didn't mean to. And it's just that, start from here. If you land on a new continent and you find strange animals, there's no point in trying to use your old vocabulary, horses and cows and so on. If what you're looking at is a kangaroo, I mean, you have to be honest and say, this is a new animal. You're inventing new words. I don't think so. It's a kangaroo. It's a very different animal from what I've ever seen before. So I think that a koala and so on. So sometimes, semanticizing is one of those words, and I don't know whether anyone has used it before. I don't care. But I needed a word that would put together two things that go hand in hand, but they're distinct. One is making sense of something, and the other one is giving meaning to something. So you might say in a sentence, give meaning to every word, and still that sentence makes no sense to you. Right? Okay, I understand the meaning of every word, but I don't make sense of it. Classic example, if you like Shakespeare, there's a Macbeth, when Macbeth is told that he's safe until the hill will come down, and that's when things will go really badly. Say, well, the trees of the hill, the forest, it doesn't move, so I'm safe. It understands the meaning of the words. It doesn't get the sense. And at some point, the soldier will come with branches, right? And it looks like the forest is moving, so he's doomed. So there is an important distinction between making sense of everything in life, as opposed to just giving meaning to everything in life. So to me, it's a bit like, and I'm oversimplifying, like in a sort of big canvas or tapestry, where you have lots and lots and lots of bits of meaning, but the overarching sense of the story comes only once you see how everything comes together. So in this making sense, giving meaning interplay, I needed a single word, and a semanticize. So how do we, as I said, make sense and give meaning to, or give meaning and make sense, because these the two things interplay, to everything around us, including ourselves. That it leads to another quote unquote sort of newer concept, which is not that new, semantic capital. As you go along as an individual, semanticizing the world, first of all, you inherit a lot of semantic capital from past generations. Certain things already come with meanings. You have, for example, a full developed natural language. That is a powerful, already semantic capital in itself. It's not just a tool, but it's a way in which you conceptualize the world and yourself. Think in terms of, for example, new expression like on life. That's another word that I coined recently. Say, our new experience, we live on life. We're not online or offline anymore. It's a bit of a mix of two, bit digital, analog, online, offline. I need a new word. So I said, okay, on life. And all of a sudden, you look at the world on life way. Okay, and that is semantic capital. So we inherited from the past. We build our own, for example, in terms of making sense of the trajectory of our lives. At some point, you are someone from Cambridge. At some other points, you become someone from Cambridge, you went to Georgetown. And that trajectory is giving meaning, building a sense of your life. Some mistakes, in my case, get reinterpreted. It's like, oh, no, but that was not really not what I wanted. So we build coherence out of thin air often. Accidents, things happen. So I ended up, for example, in Oxford and not in Cambridge because I got, that's a bit of a confession online, but I applied for 2 junior research fellowships after my PhD and went to interviews. The difference is that at the same time, roughly there was the same weeks, but I didn't know how it went, but Oxford actually called in the evening saying, we would like to offer you this. And I say yes immediately. I was so overexcited. 2 weeks later, I got a letter, by mail from Cambridge saying, we would like to offer you a junior research fellowship. I had already accepted Oxford. Now, of course, now for me, I was always meant to be in Oxford, obviously. Truth is, if they had called and the other people had written a letter, I might have been in Cambridge. I might have never met my wife, an Oxford professor. So that's life. That's the real, you look at it and it's like mind-numbing. It's like, oh my goodness, am I really just in the hands of other forces? Semantic capital is also a way of building our own sort of structure of our own lives and what is surrounding us. Now, to a large extent, semanticizing the universe is exactly what we do all the time. In the same way as spiders build their webs and some animals create their own pearls. To me, that pearl, the special sort of a reaction to a grain of sand that should not have been inside the animal, and the animal builds all that pearl to react to reality. Well, that is semanticization of the world. This world that keeps sort of irritating us, and we build pearls after pearls after pearls. They're beautiful, and they are real. That's the last point I want to make. This is not storytelling. It's not just, then anything goes. No, because we know that certain kind of combinations of sense and meaning will work. Others will crumble in no time. I can't pretend to be entirely someone else. So there is, as I said before, design within constraints and affordances. And if people listen to this, say, there's a lot of space in it. Well, imagine, that's just an analogy, of the affordances and constraints that you have when in the evening you open the fridge and you want to cook your meal this evening. What's in the fridge is the constraints and affordances. And if there are only eggs and bacon, you're not going to have a pasta, because there is no way of having a pasta out of eggs and bacon. But there are lots of ways of putting together bacon and eggs and bacon and eggs. So the more ingredients, the more we can semanticize the world in a variety of ways. But let's remember that it comes with, as I said, constraints and affordances. That's I'm afraid, another long answer to your very good question.
So from sort of what we've been talking about, it seems like one of the upshots of our discussion has been that there's a desperate need in the moment to semanticize our situation, as you would say. And yet, many of the ways in which we used to semanticize our situation are no longer available to us due to the increase in understanding of our real place in the universe, and a more accurate understanding of who we are. It seems like we are no longer able to tell a lot of the stories that we wanted to tell, that we continue to want to tell. Under these conditions, what sort of meaningful structure can we give our lives? And this is another big, grand question, but if you could just sort of sketch your elevator pitch of what the meaningful structure we are able to give our lives under in the wake of the 4 revolutions that we previously mentioned, what would that look like? What would be a story that is true to what we know and that serves the practical needs and interests of our situation, given the ecological crisis, given our increased understandings of the universe and ourselves.
Well, in a way, we are both unlucky and very lucky. As you said, we are unlucky in terms of coming at a stage in the history of humanity where a lot of stories, at least not in the popular culture, which they still have a lot of sort of grip, but for philosophers are no longer credible. The very, for example, disenchanting of the universe is a one-way road. We can't go back and thinking that rivers and mountains have some kind of spirituality in them. No matter how intelligently you do that, it's very difficult. I mean, there are sophisticated ways of looking in some way at a sort of Spinozian understanding of the universe as imbued with spirituality. But I mean, it becomes a little bit more difficult than it was, as it were, almost like default position, say, only a few centuries ago. So in that sense, we are a bit unlucky. At the same time, precisely because some of the things that have changed are also in terms of what we can do and we are able to change in the world. We have, as the phrase goes all the time, with power, great power comes great responsibility, and so on. We have transformed and I know these philosophers will be listening to this, so I hope the terminology is not off-putting, but we really have make the Theodosian problem an anthropological problem. The Theodosian problem, thinking why the world is so unfair, why the volcano kills thousands of people, why the earthquake kills thousands of people, why the suffering, why the pandemic, good, quote unquote, old days, we had a story. I mean, we basically was God. I'm always simplifying, of course, but we had a problem. It's like, well, if God is omnipotent, omniscient, benevolent, how come that all this rubbish is happening? Well, now we can actually reinterpret that story in terms of how come that a humanity that is so powerful, so intelligent, so technologically developed, that it has so massive resources, we can put robots on Mars. We're planning, at least some billionaires who have no responsibility whatsoever, they're planning not to save this planet, but to put colonies on Mars, just to put their name in the history book, where ambition becomes morally despicable. How come that we're not doing what we're supposed to do? The world is still going so badly. That is the bad news. I mean, the good news is literally the other side of the coin. That's what we can do. That is exactly the challenge we have in front of us. Not every generation of humanity in the history of this beautiful glitch on the planet has the challenge of saving the planet and humanity on it in one go. So to me, that is our Normandy landing moment. Are we really going to be serious, philosophically serious, in terms of understanding our position in the universe and therefore moving ourselves from being the receivers or the center of moral action into something that it's all about me, and something that issues or helps and supports and cares? Well, this shift to me seems to me that is the shift that today we need to make. There will be others in the future. I mean, history doesn't stop here. Remember, has ups and downs. But if you want to go up the hill of good philosophy, we need to stop or let people go. I mean, not care any longer about the ivory tower games and the scholasticism that is populating specialized journals, and start wondering about what this planet and humanity needs today in terms of conceptual design, as I said before, understanding the open problems and finding a way of offering a number of solutions. Again, just to be concrete, imagine what the world would be like if we could reinvent today the social contract. Social contract is not working very well, no longer. Something needs to be provided. We need better design. It's not a bad idea. It did a great job for a long time. And yet today, it's like under pressure. What's next? Do we want to leave it to who? Redesign the social contract. And again, it's just another example. So I think that ultimately you get a sense that there's a beginning and end in this story. One is science, technology, understanding the evolution of our knowledge on this planet. reshapes our positions with respect to ourselves, the planet, who we are, what we want, what we can do, etc. At the end of the philosophical understanding, so that's, allow me to say that's the epistemological push. But at the end, there is I would like to call it political drive. So a pull of philosophy, and has been there from Socrates onwards. So Plato went twice to Syracuse, Aristotle and Alexander, on and on and on. At the end of the day, what we want to do in philosophy is really understand in order to change, to improve, to design better. And that is something that this generation, that's the good news, could do substantially. In other words, we don't have to be scholastic. We can stop wondering about precisely the kind of issues that people do wonder about, trolley problem included, etc. All those cottage industries, we know they are cottage industries. You speak to any graduate student outside academia, outside the room, and says, yeah, of course, now if I want to publish a paper, that has to be there, but it's cottage industry. Well, you don't have to engage with that cottage industry. Stop doing it right now. Or rather, as I recommend, keep doing it. That will give you a career in academia if you want one. But never forget what the real issues are. Philosophers' problems will make you acceptable to the philosophy community, but they will, excuse me, make no difference whatsoever. Never forget that you have at least another half of your life that you can dedicate to philosophical problems. Just open a newspaper and see what is pressing today. That is where intellectual work of the highest caliber, meaning philosophical caliber, is badly needed, desperately needed.
Those are, I think, extremely important words for me to hear as a aspiring philosopher who is deeply, deeply anxious about entering the field and the process of professionalization, and who at least has certain hopes to do what you call philosophy that matters.
Remember, it's the philosophy we've always done. Let me stress this, otherwise people listening to this will think immediately, applied philosophy. Not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, Descartes, Locke, Hobbes, Hume, Kant, Hegel, Wittgenstein, Russell, Husserl, Heidegger, Sartre, you name it. If you find it in a textbook among the 25, 30 philosophers, and I'm afraid I'm not fully aware of the fact they are mostly male. That's the tradition that we also need to break badly. My supervisor, Susan Hack, was well aware of that. But if we pick up the 30 top philosophers, none of them was interested in playing with someone else's ideas and see whether I could really misinterpret or reinterpret or play more in what really, Imagine a Kant spending all his life what really you meant and writing one book after another, as some of my colleagues have, writing one book after another on Frege, on Wittgenstein, on someone else. That's not what we need. That is keeping the engine running before actually engaging in going somewhere. It's good to keep it running, but don't confuse keep the engine running with traveling. That's not traveling, it's staying in place, meaning that well-oiled, robust. One day someone will actually start using the gears and move. And that's where philosophy finally makes a difference. Sorry for interruptions. I just worry that what I'm saying might sound like, that's applied philosophy. That is, or experimental philosophy. Not at all. It's classic philosophy, capital C. Has always been that way. We've always done translation of philosophy at our best, foundations to take care of the top floor as well, the building. Roots for the flowers. That's what we do.
And if I just may add to that a little bit, I do think that one of the saving graces of philosophy, and one thing that I feel like it cannot lose, is a sense of anxiety about its own purpose, concern about about method, about matter. That's also this deeply sort of reflexive attitude of thinking about itself as a practice, is one of the things that's sort of distinctive about the discipline. And yet, as any sort of academic discipline, much like any other tradition, it ossifies and loses this it can lose this sense of awareness of what is distinctive of itself, what its essence is. Socrates was already criticizing philosophy for losing sight of the problems that matter, and this process of self-criticism seems to be sort of not so much as natural, but at least internal to the practice itself.
Yeah, I think that is part of the role. So we should not confuse philosophy entirely with that role, because otherwise you start getting into, philosophy is the art of asking questions, is the art of being critical. That's too little, but it is an important role. It's part of what we said before in terms of you need to scratch the surface. And the culture loves to sediment. And unless you go there and you reshuffle everything, sediments will start ossifying, as you said. It will start getting things for sure, always done their way. That's the traditional scholasticism, don't criticize, not just get in line and so on. So philosophy is the ultimate stage of criticism, as in sort of the Greek sense of evaluation and discussion. With a bit of an analogy, you find all this actually better said and not more argued in the logic of information. But I said before that philosophy deals with open problems. At the same time, I hope the terminology is not confusing, is also the only discipline that is close under questioning. Now, for people with a bit of maths in our audience, will understand that immediately. Here's what it means from my first half of career as a logic philosophy person. Take the natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., integers, and if you had operations on those numbers, some of them are close. Some of them, the numbers are close under them, and some others are not. So multiplication, meaning if you multiply two natural numbers whatsoever, 2 and 4, whatever, you generate more natural numbers of the integer kind. You just don't get out of the set of whole numbers. Division is not like that. If you divide 5 by, say, 10, all of a sudden, you're not in the whole numbers. I mean, so you can divide 8 by 4 and you get 2. But if you divide 4 by 8, you're out. You're already in a different set of numbers. So natural numbers are said to be close under multiplication, but not under division. Well, imagine questioning as the operation. Every discipline, it's something that sooner or later, if you dig and dig and dig, you get into a different set of questions. From mathematics to neuroscience, from chemistry, biology to physics, dig deeply, and all of a sudden you get into philosophy of mathematics, philosophy of physics, philosophy of biology, philosophy of social sciences, philosophy of art, and so on. But then get to philosophy, and no matter how much you ask questions, you never leave philosophy. You reach the bottom line. In other words, philosophy is close under questioning, meaning, in sort of more formal terms of what you were already saying, that the more we question, the more philosophical we become. It's digging, as it were, more and more deeply within the same kind of things. That's the difference to me when people say, what's the difference between maths and philosophy? How far can you dig? Because if you dig more and more deeply, at some point, why? At some point, a mathematician will say, that's a philosophical question. Welcome to my field. And in biology, in neuroscience, why? Why is that the case? And why is that the case? Why? At some point, you get out, quote unquote, of the natural numbers, and you get into another set of numbers, depending on the operation. Likewise, say square root, for example, is another way of getting out of the natural numbers. Like or subtraction, 5 minus 7, all of a sudden you go minus 2, and you into negative numbers and so on. So questioning is a way of drawing a line between a field and the philosophical foundations of that field. And once you get into the philosophical foundations, there is no other dumping ground. We are the ultimate place where you ask the ultimate questions. Any more ultimate, more philosophy. You can't get out of philosophy, in other words. You can get out of a discipline, but not of philosophy by questioning more and more and more. Essentially, you get more and more entrenched.
So, Professor Floridi, this has been an absolute pleasure. It's been
Thank you.
fascinating, and I feel like one of the worries I always have is that, not worries, but sort of a thing I constantly encounter is a general lack of understanding of what philosophy is. But in our discussion, one of the highlights for me is what we have discussed about what philosophy can be, and what a valuable philosophy will look like. And that's been absolutely fascinating. And it's been incredibly interesting to learn about your work. And I would just like to thank you for coming on our podcast.
Thank you very much. Great opportunity. And I hope we can make a bit of a difference together. That's the whole point.